Well, welcome to World War Two Part 4. In Part 3, I covered the beginnings of the Winter War. I covered the incident of the Battle of the River Plate, including involving the Admiral Graf Spee and the British squadrons involved there. So now what we're going to do is, we're going to start going through some time period now. Obviously, the next major campaigns of the war to be featured will be the Danish and Norwegian campaigns in 1940. And during this time as well, prior to April, May 1940, I will also do a special edition of World War Two, which will be just part of the playlist, but it will focus on the planning and the talk when it came time for the invasion of France. So let's just have a recap, on how the Winter War started now. Basically, what happened is Russia started making all these territorial claims and secession demands on Finland, as I went through in the last part. Finland, of course, rejected them, but like I pointed out, when Russia attacked, they attacked with armies that had already been positioned in place. So the Russians were already anticipating that they would go to war. And I think, like I said, kind of touched on it last part, it was more that the German conquest of Poland and the agreement with the Russians and the Russians annexing those 77,000 square miles of Polish territory, I think kind of fed into, the Russian desire also to expand and to conquer and to fight and to grow. So basically what we will do, now basically let's have a recap. So on November 26th, Russia demanded the withdrawal of all Finnish troops from the Russian border, Now on November 28th, there were violent protests, that Russian troops in Leningrad sector had been fired on by the Finns, Now this was to me a bit of a false flag operation, but what it did is it gave the Soviet Union the ability to renounce the non-aggression treaty that they had signed in 1932, between the USSR and Finland. So suddenly it gave Russia ability under international law to launch an attack on Finland. The next day, the Soviet Union officially broke off all diplomatic relations with Finland. Finland did then at the final death make an offer to withdraw elements of their army from the border, but it made no difference because the following day on November 30th, Soviet armies, tank divisions actually crossed into the Finnish border and launched their assault. Now, basically what happened with the war, as I've gone through in the last part, the Finnish armies were heavily outnumbered, but they were very organised, they were very efficient, and they were very skilled in winter warfare. Now, the Russians had encountered winter warfare as well, but the winter conditions in Finland were particularly bad and not very well suited for any form of motorised division, tank divisions, etc., etc. And like I pointed out, the Finns had already been building defence lines, anti-tank traps. They'd been, using territory to form kill zones for Russian divisions when they came in, were carefully elaborate, laid out, traps. The Finnish army was actually organised, and if the Finnish army would have been of larger disposition, they would have kicked Russia's backside really bad. Now, basically, the Russians did make one overestimation. They assumed that they would quickly overrun Finland, and how wrong they were. So the Russians did not fully go all in, The Russians did not go fully all in. And part of this, may be, the command structure, as I talked about in the last part, Stalin's purge of the Red Army Officer Corps and General Corps during the 30s left to me a dark hole in military experience when it came time to many brigade, divisional and army commanders. The new commanders were not as experienced or wise as the purged units. But Russia basically had about 800,000 men and 1,500 tanks. The Finns had about 150,000 men, 160,000 men. So it really was a David and Goliath. Into early December, the Russians intensified their attacks on December 1st. And then on December 2nd, the Soviet news agency TASS announced that a People's Government of Finland had been formed. Clearly, the Russians were anticipating a quick victory and then assumed that this TASS organisation, this puppet government, would then be installed by them to run Finland, thus making Finland a direct annexation, basically, although not militarily overly so. But basically, nothing goes in favour of Russians in this initial period. Okay, the Finns put up a very valiant defence. They're very well organised. The movement is excellent. You know, they move along narrow paths in middle of dense forests on bicycles or skis. They attack the big enemy units in the flank, and in fact, heavy losses on Russians. You know, the Russians, pretty much for the most part, with the numbers, trucks, tanks, are basically sticking to the roads. So the Finns cleverly use the terrain, go through nearby forests, thus often going by Soviet units undetected, to set up traps to then massacre, you know, Soviet battalions, brigades or divisions. Really fantastic tactics. Now, the Finns also basically attack the Russian tanks with, you know, firebombs, essentially. What the Russians will later call Molotov cocktails, which are basically a petrol bomb. Okay, they'd attack the tanks with petrol bombs, you know, which with the smoke and everything could disorientate the tank crews. You know, very simple tactic. Petrol in a bottle, you know, stuff a rag in, light a flame, throw it on tanks. Suddenly, if you get 3 or 4 of them, the tank's in flames, the smoke's covering all the vantage points, you know. It can be very disorientating. Now, basically, the puppet government formed by Russians, okay, on December 2nd, you know, called for the people of Finland to rise up, okay, and to overthrow, you know, their legitimate government in favour of the, you know, TASS regime that Russia was planning to install. But sadly, it didn't go very well, did that? And basically, the leader of this new puppet government signs a treaty with USSR giving the Russians all they asked for. Okay, in exchange for the whole of Soviet Karelia. So basically, you know, the Russians create this puppet government in Finland, and then this puppet government in Finland then says, yep, you know, if Russia wins, we're just going to give them all the territorial annexations they want. We're going to give them all secessions they want. You know, we just want a bit of the Karelian, you know, peninsula. You know, so basically, Russia had it all set up in their way. But sadly, the initial fighting didn't go their way. You know, over next week or so, the Finnish troops withdraw in good order. They withdrew to their main defensive line called the Mannerheim Line. Okay, it was named after General Carl Gustav Mannerheim, who planned the line as a defense against Russia. You know, he actually also founded the Finnish Republic in 1919 and was the major voice fighting out against the Russians, okay? But it basically is not like the Maginot Line that we'll talk about in France in the preparation for attack on France. It's not like a heavily armed, intricate defensive line. It's more about, you know, using wood, barriers, you know, concrete strong points over a certain period across Karelian Isthmus. Now, on December 4th, okay, the battleship Nelson is damaged by a magnetic mine, and that is the last major ship to be lost to the magnetic mine. As I talked about in the last video, by attaching a cable around the ships, you know, the British were able to quickly neutralise the magnetic mine, but it was a terror, you know, in its initial findings. Thankfully, one was dropped in Thames Estuary at low tide, and they managed to work it out. Also on 4th of December, you know, 2 destroyers are sunk, 2 others damaged, and a mine layers damaged. Now, on 5th of December, okay, the Russians officially reached the Mannerheim Line, okay, defended by the Finnish 2nd Army Corps, and then the following day, the Russians launched heavy attacks on the Mannerheim Line. And December 7th, okay, a Russian division actually succeeds in breaking through to the village of Suonumon Alsi. Some of these words are really beyond me. Basically, Denmark, Sweden and Norway also declare neutrality when it comes to the Finnish-Russian war. So Denmark, Sweden and Norway say, thanks, but no thanks. We're not really getting involved in that. Now, on December 11th, okay, Hitler meets the Norwegian political Vidkun Quisling. I always called him V Quisling when I was young, because it's because it's a word that ties me tongue. But Quisling was the founder of a Nazi movement in Norway, which of course would lead into next year the Norwegian campaign. Now on December 14th, okay, Russia is formally expelled from the League of Nations following its declaration of War on Finland. Now, the thing about the League of Nations is the League of Nations, like the later United Nations, which is just basically an attempt to make an improved version of the League of Nations. As the League of Nations showed from when it was created to the start of World War II, it was wholly inadequate to deal with any international crisis. It could not follow its mandate of stopping war. The League of Nations idea, like the EU, like the United Nations, was that, you know, if they formed like a group like the UN, the League of Nations, then they would be able to put off countries going to war. They'd be able to diplomatically solve problems, so warfare wasn't required. It was all part of the trauma of World War One, you know, the great tragedy. But sadly, the League of Nations was a failure, but they do, expel, the USSR. So also on 14th of December, okay, Hitler orders the commanders of the Wehrmacht, okay, to prepare plans for any potential invasion of Norway, okay. So already by the end of 1939, Adolf Hitler is already planning an invasion of Norway due to certain supplies and raw materials there. It is a vital place that Germany must take, because also Germany, as we'll talk about, was worried that Britain and France would impose order in Norway and thus limit the German Navy's ability to move freely, and also position air bases there and land units there, which could cause a lot of trouble to Germany. So Hitler's already preparing, to attack Norway. Now on December 15th, okay, 3 British infantry brigades arrive in France, and they are formed into 5th Division, okay, of what will become known as the BEF, the British Expeditionary Force, the army that Britain sent into France in preparation for war against Germany in 1940. The division is deployed, okay, south of Lille, okay, on a fortified line, and basically over time they build, expand, and make that line a better defensive position. Now, this also, okay, puts Hitler in a position where he now starts putting more troops, okay, on the Western Front to kind of counter the British sending those brigades across, forming a division and starting to create a fortified area. So on December 16th, okay, the main Russian assault begins, okay. They've launched their preliminary attacks on November 30th, okay. The attacks place in the Suma sector following a massive artillery bombardment. But during the night, okay, the Finnish soldiers who've been given special training destroy about 70 tanks through that one night. Over that one night, Russian troops in the Suma area destroy 70 Russian tanks. Also, following on from the Battle of River Plate, December 17th, is the date that the Admiral Graf Spee is indeed scuttled in Montevideo harbour. So on December 22nd, okay, Russian attacks are coming in and in and in, but the Finnish defence lines are holding. Their clever tactics, their organisation, the traps they have sent, the tank defences they've set are paying off, okay, and the Russian army divisions are getting, attacked and harried. Brigades are getting, set into traps and destroyed. The Finns are launching night attacks. They're using the terrain to cleverly fight around the Russians. The Russians are just not making headway against the Finns at all. Now, basically, this allows the Finns to maintain their front line. They are maintaining their front line, okay. Now, on December 23rd, okay, a number of Latin American countries send a strong protest to British, French and German governments about the recent naval action at the mouth of the River Plate. Because really South America is far away from the war, and yet this kind of incident of the battle at River Plate with Admiral Graf Spee, the Exeter, the Ajax, etc., has kind of panicked them into thinking that the war may not be as far away as they initially thought. Now, also on December 23rd, okay, 2 German merchant ships are intercepted by British ships near the United States coast. One of them is sunk, okay, the other takes refuge off the coast of Florida. Now, Roosevelt writes a letter. Gets wrote a letter, by Churchill, and Churchill argues that police action by Allied fleets in Atlantic only serves to protect the US and South American merchant traffic. So basically, in response to the earlier talk from the South American countries putting out a strong protest about the recent naval action at River Plate, and also with a German ship seeking refuge off coast of Florida, Churchill writes to Roosevelt saying, look, all our naval action is simply to also help protect the merchant ships, the supply lanes across the Atlantic and in the South Atlantic. So he's already trying to make, overtures to America that, we're doing it for your benefit as well. On December 24th, Pope Pius XII makes a Christmas appeal, appealing for peace, but obviously Adolf Hitler and the new wannabe conqueror Joseph Stalin are certainly not going to listen to that. Now, on Christmas Day 1939, we'll highlight what happens every Christmas Day through the war. Now, this isn't like the First World War when, the German soldiers were told that famous line from World War One that a general quoted or a commander quoted. The soldiers were told they'd be home by Christmas. Sadly, they didn't say which Christmas. Now, December 25th, within the Maginot Line and the Siegfried Lines, the armies celebrate the first Christmas of World War II. The Western Front from the initial French forays into German territory, which didn't really go anywhere, and kind of like I've already pointed out when I spoke on that, really half-hearted pinpricks on the German line. The French didn't really have the will to launch a major attack, as I explained. There were up to near 90 divisions in France, and Germany at that time only had 25 on their western border, so France would have met not overly too much resistance. But the Western Front is quiet. Now in Finland, the Finns are definitely celebrating. They're still keeping the Russians out, using those guerrilla tactics in those severe conditions of up to minus 30, minus 40. It is a David and Goliath, and at the moment David is definitely winning, holding the Russians off. The Russians are unable to really make the headway they want to make, and are getting a very bloody nose. Now on December 25th, King George VI broadcasts a Christmas message to the British Empire, and King George quotes, "A new year is at hand. We cannot tell what it will bring. If it brings peace, how thankful we all shall be. If it brings us continued struggle, we shall remain undaunted." And also, following Christmas on December 28th is another major day that the UK would have to live with for a long time. December 28th officially signals the beginning of meat rationing in the UK. Now, on December 25, the Finns succeed in their third attack to drive the Russian armies back from the north bank of Lake Ladoga. Now, the Russian infantry division are routed, go into full retreat. The Finns capture a whole number of artillery pieces, tanks and trucks. Just another little symbol that the Finnish David is giving the USSR Goliath a good kicking. On December 30th, Hitler makes, to me, a very troubling statement to the German people, including this little message. And this kind of tells you exactly where he's planning to go. Hitler gives a New Year message to the Reich, and he quotes, "The Jewish capitalistic world will not survive the 20th century." So in a way, Hitler there is already saying, I've used the Jews as a scapegoat in Germany to, get the German people wound up, fired up, get me to power. And now he's announcing already with that veiled comment the hideous horror that he's going to unleash on the Jewish people as early as the end of 1939. Now, in December 31st, so the first months at war, we've gone from, September with the attack on Poland. We're now at the end of December 1939. I'm already on part 4. Goodness knows, by the time I get to 1941 and World War II in Pacific starts and the Eastern Front starts, how many videos this playlist will be, but it's going to be a lot of 40-minute videos. And when I get to, the end of the war in 1945, I'll probably collapse on a sofa somewhere for a few hours. But by the end of December, the German naval action involving the U-boats, German warships, have already sunk 750,000 tons of shipping, both warships, merchant ships, convoy ships, the whole works, 750,000 tons of shipping has been lost. Also, the U-47 at Scapa Flow managed to get into the apparently invincible defences of Scapa Flow, sunk the Royal Oak. There's been the Battle of River Plate. The war at sea is actually going quite well for the Germans at the moment. They have lost the Admiral Graf Spee, they've lost a little bit of merchant shipping, and they've lost about 10 submarines, and that is it. But they have inflicted massive, massive damage on Allied shipping and neutral shipping. Because there were neutral ships sunk as well, sometimes by mistake. Not quite as bad as the Lusitania incident in World War I, which brought America into the war, and I'll just say that, I'm not exactly convinced that wasn't a bit of a false flag. Now, okay, into 1940. We're going to 1940. Now, in 1940, okay, Hermann Goering, okay, head of the Luftwaffe, officially takes control of all the German war industry. And on January 5th, more political moves, okay, Russia signs a commercial treaty with Bulgaria, okay, so Russia's already kind of attacking Finland, not doing very well, getting a bloody nose, but they're also making diplomatic overtures to other countries in Eastern Europe, of course. So Russia, from annexing part of Poland to now attacking Finland, they're now seeking treaties and to, closing up diplomatic relations with other countries in Eastern Europe. So they're kind of showing what they're about. Now, on 8th of January, okay, the Russian 44th Division is completely annihilated by Finnish forces in the area of Suomussalmi. The Finns again capture a large number of tanks, artillery guns, and trucks. The Russians are really taking a bad kicking. Now, basically into 1940, we had the meat rationing introduced towards the end of December 1939. By January 8th, okay, further food is being rationed. This already shows, okay, the effect of the U-boat war and the German naval actions already. Supplies are already dwindling. Also, Britain has lost supplies with certain places in Europe. But also, bacon, butter, sugar are now also being rationed to join meat from 10, 11 days earlier. Now, on January 10th, okay, Hitler tells the commanders of the Navy, the Army, and the Air Force that he's decided to attack on the Western Front in 7 days' time. January 17th, Hitler announces he wants to attack the Western Front. Now, a German aircraft, okay, carrying Major Reinberger and Major Hohenmans, okay, have to make a forced landing near the Meuse, okay, a Belgium agricultural town, okay, near the German border. Now, basically, those two German officers are carrying secret documents that show German plans for an attack on the Western Front, okay, and this also includes alerting the Belgians to the fact that the Netherlands, aka at the time Holland, and Belgium are to be attacked under those plans as well. So from this plane crashing, the Belgians retrieve these documents that say, yes, Hitler is going to attack on the Western Front, and he's also going to attack us, which obviously is a bit of an eye-opener. Now, Hitler puts off the attack on the Western Front to January 20th, okay, because we are in Western Europe winter at the moment, okay, so still, for air supplies, the Luftwaffe, low mist, low cloud, it's not the best environment to go to war, so Hitler puts it off. And basically, on the next day, okay, Belgium refuses to give permission in light of the plans captured, identifying a potential German attack on Western Front. France and Britain want to send troops into Belgium territory to form a defence line there, and Belgium says no. Now, only a day later from that, okay, very quick moving events these, only a day later from that, okay, Hitler officially postpones his offensive on Western Front. Now, we, of course, will get to that later in 1940. And like I say, I will do a whole video on the planning and the different plans, and then the plan that finally came up with for attacking France before we go through the invasion of France. But Hitler has just purposely put it off now, okay? Also, Allied forces prepare to move troops into Norway. So as I detailed earlier, Hitler has already seen that as a danger and already ordered, preliminary planning for a potential invasion of Denmark and Norway due to the threat of shipping, due to the threat of air bases with troops being positioned there. And it seems that Hitler has already preempted Britain and France by coming up with those plans first, but it shows that he was on the money. He knew they would make a move to Norway. Now, basically on January 20th, okay, Churchill speaks, basically trying to prop up the Navy. The losses at the end of the year in merchant shipping, etc., were quite substantial. Churchill does a speech basically trying to make out that everything is still okay. They are still, maintaining control of the naval lanes. And on January 26th, okay, 735,000 children, have been evacuated from the war. Okay, but a number of them come back after January 8th. Basically, when the war first started, many children were evacuated from London, but a number of those, up to half of those children, have now come back because at the moment there has been no air battle. Of course, we'll go through the Battle of Britain this year too. Some major events in 1940. We have the invasion of Denmark and Norway. We, of course, then have the enormous attack on the Western Front by the newly equipped, newly organised German armies with their fantastic cunning plan that I will go through. Because in the First World War, the Germans used something called, I'll go into this more detail later, but the Germans used a plan called the Schlieffen plan, a plan that were designed to hook through Norway and Belgium in a big arching circle, encircle Paris and win the war. Now, that didn't work well, and they got ground down in the trenches in Belgium and France, basically, and got stuck there a long time. And they were going to originally use a modified version of that plan, but a cunning general comes up with another plan, but we will talk about that when we get to it. Now, okay, by the end of January, okay, they're not fully convinced, but Hitler orders preparations for campaign against Norway and Denmark. Basically, he's now saying, right, we need to move quickly, okay, because I think he's just aware. Hitler had a very good understanding of human nature, even though he wasn't the greatest military commander of all time, even though he liked to play being a great military commander. But basically, Hitler, you can see with these preparations, he's kind of getting G'd up and et up at the thought of Norway being invaded by allies. Now, basically, speaking in Manchester, Churchill says he's puzzled and worried, okay, about the phony war. He's basically concerned because the war broke out. Britain, France declared war, early September 1939. And at the moment, the Luftwaffe have not attacked Britain. Okay, there's been no attack in the Western Front. The only attacks in the Western Front are actually from the French into the Saar region as a counter to the invasion of Poland early on, which pettered out very quickly. The Germans have not attacked in the West at all, and Churchill admits he's getting concerned about that. Now, on the end of January, okay, secret negotiations are taking place in Stockholm, Sweden, basically prompted by the Russians to try and reach an end to the conflict, okay? And resulting from those talks, the USSR sends the Swedish government a note. The Soviet Union basically says the Soviet Union has no objective in principle to a possible agreement with the right government, the legitimate government of Finland. This declaration opens way to peace since USSR is implicitly saying that it's ready to renounce support of Kustinen's puppet government. So the Russians form this puppet government, then get this puppet government to announce that when they win the war, they will give the Russians everything they ask for. And already within a month and a bit, 5 weeks, the Russians have taken such a kicking that they're now saying, well, we now renounce the puppet government that we created. Now, okay, Adolf Hitler on 30th of January, okay, which is the 7th anniversary of his chancellorship. Of course, he became chancellor in 1932, later became leader of Germany in a short time after. But basically, Hitler declares the first phase of war has been completed with destruction of Poland. Now, he said the second phase may start with a war of bombs, okay? And, it may be that he was reacting to Churchill's speech. But guess what? The Luftwaffe was much larger, had more trained pilots, but guess what? They couldn't beat RAF. Now, February 1940, okay, there has been planning going along because, the Soviet army has been given a real bloody nose. A real bloody nose by the Finns. Many armies have been trapped, led into traps. Many armies have met fortifications that they just cannot overcome. Many Russian divisions and brigades have absolutely been destroyed. Now, basically what this does is it puts Russia into a position where they have to act, okay? They have to move. Now, there is a marshal called Marshal Semyon Timoshenko, okay? Now, he reorganizes, okay, the troops on the Finnish front. He reorganizes the attack plans and comes up with a new plan to attack Finland, gaining new divisions that are being brought up to the region, reorganizing his tank and artillery brigades into more sledgehammer units, reinforcing with many, many more aircraft, okay. So basically, Marshal Timoshenko replans a new strategy. The original strategy was given a bloody nose, but now he's reorganized his armies into new armies. He's brought additional divisions up, additional tanks and aircraft, and he's replanned a new attack. Now, this is known as the Timoshenko Offensive, okay, and this begins on February 1st, and this is a renewed second attack based on the knowledge they've gained from the first attack, okay. The Timoshenko Offensive begins. Now, in the Suma region where they attacked before, okay, there's an absolutely brutal and long artillery bombardment, okay, backed up more properly this time by massed air sorties, okay. Aircraft are attacking and raiding the Finnish positions in combination with the artillery, and tanks and infantry also go in. So the Russians this time have reorganised and are now fighting under a more combined arms system. The artillery is bombarding Finnish positions. The Red Air Force is strafing and attacking and bombing Finnish positions. And while all that's going on, the Russian tanks and infantry are advancing in unison. You know, you often see footage of Russian tanks moving and Russian soldiers running in between them. You know, they often combine the infantry with the tanks, a tactic that Guderian and other German commanders did not agree with and did not, use. But the Russians did use that. The whole point is that the tanks run through the defence lines. The Russian troops are already there, start picking off straddlers and survivors. Very good tactics to try and overwhelm your enemy when you've got superior numbers. Now, by 3rd of February, okay, the Finnish army is still holding on at the Mannerheim line. They are still, even under Marshal Timoshenko's second renewed attack, reorganised attack, they are still at the moment managing to hang on to the defences of the Mannerheim line. Now, the Allied Supreme War Council approves a plan for intervention in Finland, okay? So basically, the Allied Council, Britain, France, etc., now agree that they will send help, as in anti-aircraft guns, anti-tank guns, supplies, weaponry, munitions, to Finland to help them against the Soviets. But frankly, it's not going to be able to take off in time to make much of a difference. Now, basically, okay, another little keynote. In February 9th, okay, General Erich von Manstein, okay, is appointed Commander-in-Chief of the newly formed 28th Army Corps. Now, General Manstein would actually play a major part in the attack on France that we will go through. On the 10th of February, okay, in Finland, okay, the Finnish Defence Council, attended by a number of high Finnish delegates, including General Mannerheim himself and Minister Raite, discuss political approaches, okay, to solve the war with the USSR. By 11th of February, okay, the Soviet 7th Army finally breaches the Mannerheim line. Now, upon finally breaching the Mannerheim line, okay, the Finns do not fall apart and crack and get encircled. They withdraw in a very organised order and fall back to their second defensive line. The Mannerheim line was their main defensive line on Karelian Isthmus, but behind the Mannerheim line, in case of the first Mannerheim line being overrun, the Finns had also created a second, albeit weaker, defensive line that they could fall back to, and the Finns do fall back to it, in good order and start to man the defences of their second defensive line. Also on February 11th, okay, an economic agreement between the USSR and Germany, okay, by which Russia will send raw materials to Germany, including oil, okay, in exchange for agricultural products. Goods, arms, weaponry, stuff like that. So that's another little deal between the USSR and Germany. On February 12th, General Mannerheim expresses anxieties about proposals for Allied intervention. Basically, he's getting a bit worried that the Russian attack on Finland is now drawing the bigger powers in and could widen the war and escalate the war in Finland. General Mannerheim is not keen on having French and British armies and aircraft on Finnish soil fighting the Russians. They wouldn't really send troops in, but they'd send equipment and weaponry to fight the Russians because that could widen the war. And then, under certain circumstances, the Western Allies could actually get pulled into the war. General Mannerheim is not really anxious for that to happen because it's his country that will be destroyed in any, conflagration of the war. So basically, okay, mid-February, the British government announces that all merchant ships on convoy routes are now to be armed. Okay, this is due to growing U-boat threat. The German government, okay, because Britain announces that all merchant ships are now to be armed, the German government quickly replies saying that because you are arming your merchant ships, we can now attack and sink them at will because you are making them warships. So Britain announces their plan to arm all convoy ships. Okay, because the convoys are being hit hard by the Germans. The Germans obviously not happy about this because the U-boats are having a lot of success. Then counter that by announcing, well, if you put guns on all your convoy ships, then we at sea will consider them, warships, and we'll treat them as such, even though they're sinking them anyway. So I'm not sure what the Germans were hoping that would do. On 16th of February, okay, British destroyer, the Cossack, attacks a German ship, the Altmark, in Norwegian waters. Okay, so this is the first time that there has been a proper naval engagement in Norwegian waters, kind of announcing the war that is to come. But basically, a British destroyer attacks a German ship in Norwegian waters. Now, the Altmark was a supply ship. Okay, it was one of the supply ships that supplied the Admiral Graf Spee during River Plate, and it has 300 British prisoners on board. Okay, but in the attack and the subsequent boarding, they managed to release all 300 British prisoners. But the Norwegian government does protest to the UK about attacking a German ship in their territorial waters, because Norway, as I've demonstrated, has already declared neutrality. So Norway feel that Britain coming into their territorial waters and attacking a German ship, may not be taken too well in Germany, that they have allowed that. So he has to put that protest out to let Germany know that he's not backing the move. Now, on February 17th, okay, the Finnish troops have completely withdrawn from Mannerheim Line. They've fallen back to secondary positions that I mentioned. Now, basically on February 19th, okay, obviously due to the German ship Altmark, the supply ship, being attacked by a British destroyer, Hitler orders his commanders to speed up preparations for an attack on Norway. So, we've covered an amount of time here, okay? We'll just go through some more efforts. Now, General Timoshenko, meanwhile, is regrouping his formations as a prelude. He's breached the Mannerheim Line. The Finns have fallen back in good position. Now, Marshal Timoshenko does not want to go headlong into the second line, so he pauses, reforms and regroups his armies, his tanks, his aircraft in preparation for a heavy assault on that second line. And 23rd of February, okay, the USSR, passes to Finland a diplomatic courier stating what they must do, okay, to stop the war in Finland. Now, basically, Finland must surrender the Karelian Isthmus and the borders of Lake Ladoga, okay, and grant a 30-year lease to the USSR of the Hanko Peninsula, okay, and they must also agree to a pact of mutual assistance, okay, making the Gulf of Finland strategically secure for both countries. So this is what I talked about in a prior video. Russia's wanting to expand the naval bases, the naval operations, and basically they're wanting Finland to give them a guarantee that Finnish aircraft and the Finnish government will help defend the Sea of Finland, which will also strengthen the Soviets' sphere of influence in that area. So Sweden also on 23rd of February announces officially it will in no circumstances engage in the Russian-Finnish conflict, and Sweden more importantly announces they will not allow any allied units to cross Swedish territory. So, the war is expanding, okay, we are approaching the next major moves of the war. February 27th, okay, General Mannerheim orders his armies to evacuate the second defensive line, and over the next few days, that second defensive line is overrun. Timoshenko's reorganised and reformed and reinforced attacks succeeded in breaching the Mannerheim Line, which the Soviet army had not been able to do for 2 months, okay, and had suffered massive reverses. But Timoshenko has now not only overrun and punched through the Mannerheim Line, he's now also punched through the second Finnish defensive line. So the Finns are now, on the losing side. They've put up a valiant struggle for a few months, but basically, the Russians are now overwhelming them under the reorganised armies of Marshal Timoshenko. Now, in the US, okay, the Secretary of State, okay, Sumner Wells, arrives in Berlin. Okay, he's been to Rome, he arrives in Berlin, he's then going on to London and Paris, okay? He's basically been sent to Europe to speak to Mussolini, Hitler, Churchill and Daladier. Basically, he's been sent to speak to them all to try and come up with a mediation settlement, to try and find a way to see if the war can be ended before it gets any worse. But the war now is in full flow. Hitler is already, advanced in his planning to attack Denmark and Norway. He's already had plans in motion to attack France and the Low Countries in Europe. So the war is not going to be stopped. So, on March 2nd, okay, the French army reveals that the Germans are indeed preparing to attack Norway and Denmark. Norway repeat their warning that Allied troops may not cross their territory. Sweden also issues that warning. And we'll end on this one, okay? We'll end on this one on March the 3rd. General Timoshenko launches a massive counter-offensive in Karelia. So, in next part, we will cover the end of the Winter War. We will move into the war in Norway and Denmark and continue the furthered lead up to the war in the West, the invasion of the Low Countries and France, to which I'll do a video on the planning before we then go through the events. So there's World War II Part 4 in the bag. I will catch you on the next one. Haplo, I hope you're enjoying the series. I'm doing this for you. I'm out for now.